A couple of months ago, I received a request from a viewer to do an episode or a video about guilty pleasure records. I thought that would be fun. So I sat down one morning to jot down a list. It was a lot harder than I thought it would be. I'd write down an album and then I'd end up crossing it off. I felt guilty about adding it to my guilty pleasures list because what I consider a guilty pleasure might be somebody's real pleasure. I didn't want to make anybody feel bad about their taste. There were a couple of easy ones to add to the list if I was going to go through with it, only because the history has a very divisive one. Great example is Born Again by Black Sabbath, a record that I really like, but a lot of fans don't. I always will have a soft spot in my heart because it was the first band I ever saw live. Kind of. Quiet Riot did open for them, so technically it was Quiet Riot was the first live band I saw. Another one that came to mind while I was doing the list is the Crash Test Dummies' first album, The Ghosts That Haunt Me. I like that album, but a lot of people have a problem with Brad Roberts' bass baritone voice, which I happen to appreciate. The third song in that album, Superman Song, came at a pivotal moment in my life, so has another soft spot in my heart. There's also albums that I feel really guilty about how much I spent on them, like Spinneret by Brody Dahl. Spent way too much on it. Look it up on Discogs and you'll have an idea. I'm not going to say it out loud. I also spent too much on her solo album, Diploid Love. Another one I had to have. Then I ran across an album in my collection that I don't feel guilty for listening to, but I feel guilty for not liking it. And I am ashamed to admit this. And I'm also a little bit apprehensive to talk about it because I'll probably lose subscribers over this. But here goes. But before I start, I am a big fan of jazz, especially Miles Davis's Kind of Blue. I'm not, I wouldn't call myself an expert on jazz by any means. I just really appreciate it. And I like Miles Davis, and Miles Davis's Kind of Blue introduced me to John Coltrane. So I bought most of Coltrane's 1950s and 1960s discography. And then there's this. A Love Supreme is one record I had to own because it's considered by most to be a classic and also a masterpiece, right up there with Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. When I put it on the turntable, I didn't know what I expected, to be honest. I expected maybe something, a spiritual experience like Kind of Blue gave me the first time I heard it. What I got out of this was noise. I certainly didn't expect the intensity of Coltrane's playing or the complexity or even the chaos of what I was hearing. So when I walked away, I said, it has to be me. It has to be the expectations that I brought to the album. Like I said, I am not an expert in jazz. I mean, I have my favorites. I've already mentioned Miles Davis and Charles Mingus. I really like to listen to Charles Mingus. A Love Supreme sounded like it was recorded on a planet that I wasn't invited to. Like I had stumbled upon something sacred that I wasn't meant to hear, nor was I meant to understand it. So I gave it a couple days and I listened to it again, and I had the same experience. I couldn't get into it. So I gave it another couple days, listened to it a third time, and I believe a fourth time that same week. I'm a firm believer that you have to listen to a record 2, preferably 3 times for it to burn its groove into your memory so that you can become familiar with it. And that's kind of why I discount a lot of what reviewers will say after hearing a record for the first time and then they'll write about it. You need more time with music, for the most part, to fully appreciate it. And that's what I hope to do with A Love Supreme. The best way I can describe it is tune fatigue. I think I was expecting a type of structure, or at least an underlying structure of a sketch that he was improvising on, kind of like what you get with Kind of Blue or some of those other experimental jazz records. I didn't hear any kind of structure with A Love Supreme. And of course, that was probably what Coltrane was going for. He did have a sketch, and then he pushed the boundaries of that sketch in the music. He went off into territories that I had a hard time following. While others walk away from A Love Supreme feeling transformed, I walked away feeling extremely guilty. The great jazz journalist Nat Hentoff once said this: "By the time A Love Supreme hit, Train struck such a spiritual chord in so many listeners that people started to think of him as being beyond human." While Hentoff does say this characterization is unfair, it does echo what a lot of people had said about the genius behind this album over the years. And maybe that's it. Not that Coltrane is beyond human, but maybe the music is. It could be that it's a frequency that I'm just not ready to hear. But I'll keep trying. I would love to hear your thoughts about this, and maybe you'll help me to understand it a little better. You can comment below or get in touch with me at the website joyofvinyl.com. And as always, thank you for watching. Love to hear from you. And until next time, please take care of yourself and enjoy your records.